Imagine ruling a kingdom where every decision could mean power or death. Cleopatra's life wasn't just beauty and luxury, it was sharp intelligence, dangerous politics, passionate love, and a slow march toward tragedy. She fought to protect her throne in a world dominated by enemies, using wit, charm, and sheer will to survive longer than anyone expected. If you enjoy these short, human stories from history, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me where you're listening from. It never stops blowing my mind seeing people from Cairo to California sharing the same story across time. Tonight, we're stepping into Cleopatra, a life of power, love, and tragedy, one of history's most dramatic stories.
Picture the grand palace of Alexandria, where the warm Mediterranean breeze carries the scent of jasmine through marble corridors, and where the future of an empire rests in the tiny hands of a newborn princess. The Egypt that welcomed Cleopatra into the world was unlike anywhere else on Earth. Imagine walking through the streets of Alexandria in those days where Greek philosophers debated beside Egyptian priests, where Roman merchants haggled with Nubian traders, and where the famous lighthouse stood as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, its beacon guiding ships safely home across the darkening waters. This was the Ptolemaic kingdom, a realm that had been ruled by Cleopatra's Greek ancestors for nearly 3 centuries since Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. The Ptolemies had created something magical here, a fusion of Greek learning, Egyptian tradition, and international commerce that made Alexandria the New York City of the ancient world. And into this remarkable civilization, our young princess was born. From her earliest days, Cleopatra breathed in an atmosphere of learning and luxury that would shape her into the remarkable leader she would become. The palace libraries contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world. Here, young Cleopatra would spend countless hours absorbing knowledge that most rulers of her time never even knew existed. But let's pause for a moment and consider what childhood was like for a future pharaoh. While other children played simple games, Cleopatra was learning the intricate art of statecraft. Picture her as a small girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, sitting in on diplomatic meetings where her father, Ptolemy XII, negotiated with Roman senators and Egyptian high priests. She would have watched carefully those intelligent dark eyes, taking in every gesture, every subtle shift in tone, every strategic pause in conversation. Her education was extraordinary by any standard, ancient or modern. While most women of her era, even royal ones, received only basic instruction in household management and perhaps some music or poetry, Cleopatra's tutors were the finest scholars money could attract. They came from Athens, from Rhodes, from the great centres of learning throughout the Mediterranean, and they brought with them knowledge that would have been considered revolutionary. Mathematics was one of her favourite subjects, and she quickly mastered concepts that challenged even her adult tutors. Imagine her working late into the evening by lamplight, calculating trade routes and taxation systems, already thinking like the ruler she would one day become. She understood that numbers were power, that the pharaoh who could master Egypt's complex economy would be the pharaoh who could maintain independence in an increasingly Roman world. But perhaps even more impressive was her linguistic ability. By the time she reached adolescence, Cleopatra could speak fluently in Greek, Egyptian, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, Ethiopian, and several other languages that have been lost to history. This wasn't just showing off, it was strategic brilliance. When she spoke to Egyptian farmers in their native tongue, or negotiated with Jewish merchants in Hebrew, or charmed Roman diplomats in perfect Latin, she was building bridges that previous Ptolemaic rulers had never even attempted to construct. Her father, Ptolemy XII, recognized early on that his daughter possessed something special. Unlike his sons, who seemed content with the pleasures of palace life, Cleopatra demonstrated an insatiable curiosity about everything from military tactics to agricultural techniques. She would often slip away from her tutors to wander through Alexandria's bustling markets, talking with merchants and craftsmen, learning about the real Egypt that existed beyond the palace walls. These early adventures through the city streets taught her lessons no classroom could provide. She learned how the seasonal flooding of the Nile affected grain prices, how political rumours spread through the bazaar faster than official proclamations, and how ordinary Egyptians viewed their Greek-descended rulers. This knowledge would prove invaluable when she eventually took the throne. But for now, she was simply a curious teenager, soaking up the rhythms of her future kingdom. The political situation during Cleopatra's youth was precarious and complex. Rome's influence over Egypt grew stronger each year, and her father's reign was marked by constant tension between maintaining Egyptian independence and appeasing Roman demands. Young Cleopatra watched as her father was forced into exile and then restored to power with Roman help. A humiliating cycle that taught her crucial lessons about the delicate balance of international politics. During one of these political crises, when Cleopatra was about 14, she accompanied her father to Rome itself. Picture this teenage princess walking through the Forum, observing the heart of the empire that increasingly controlled her homeland's destiny. She would have seen the magnificent temples, the bustling crowds, the impressive architecture that demonstrated Rome's wealth and power. But more importantly, she would have studied the Roman political system, watching senators debate and observing how the world's most powerful republic actually functioned. This visit to Rome was transformative for young Cleopatra. She realized that Egypt's survival depended not on military strength alone, but on diplomatic skill and economic leverage. Egypt controlled the grain that fed much of the Roman world, and she began to understand how this resource could be used as both carrot and stick in negotiations with Rome. The seeds of her later political strategies were planted during these formative experiences in the Eternal City. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra's education continued to expand in remarkable directions. She studied naval architecture and could discuss the technical specifications of warships with her admirals. She learned about medicine and astronomy, understanding how the flooding of the Nile could be predicted by observing the stars. She mastered the art of rhetoric, practicing speeches that could inspire soldiers before battle or convince skeptical nobles to support her policies. But perhaps most importantly, she learned about the delicate art of ruling a diverse population. Egypt in her time was incredibly cosmopolitan. Alexandria alone contained Greeks, Romans, Jews, Syrians, Nubians, and native Egyptians. Each group with its own customs, languages, and loyalties. Previous to Ptolemaic rulers had often favoured the Greek elite, treating other populations as subjects rather than citizens. Cleopatra began to envision a different approach, one that would embrace Egypt's diversity as a source of strength, rather than viewing it as a challenge to manage. Her teenage years were also marked by intensive study of Egyptian religion and culture. While her ancestors had often maintained a somewhat aloof relationship with native Egyptian traditions, Cleopatra immersed herself completely. She learned to read hieroglyphs, participated in religious ceremonies at the great temples, and began to understand the spiritual significance of the pharaoh's role in Egyptian society. This religious education was more than ceremonial. The pharaoh was considered a living god, the earthly representative of divine power, and Cleopatra understood that this spiritual authority was just as important as political power. She spent countless hours with the high priests of Ptah, Isis, and other major deities, learning the intricate rituals and theological concepts that would legitimize her eventual rule in the eyes of her Egyptian subjects. As she approached her 18th birthday, Cleopatra had transformed from a curious princess into a formidable young woman whose education surpassed that of most rulers in the ancient world. She could debate philosophy with Greek scholars, discuss engineering projects with Roman architects, negotiate trade agreements in multiple languages, and perform the sacred rituals that connected her to Egypt's 3,000-year-old traditions. The palace staff who'd watched her grow up began to whisper among themselves about the remarkable transformation they had witnessed. Here was a princess who could spend the morning reviewing tax records, the afternoon practicing sword techniques with her guard, and the evening translating poetry from Greek into Egyptian. Her energy seemed boundless, her curiosity insatiable, and her intelligence absolutely extraordinary. But even as Cleopatra's abilities continued to develop, the political situation around her grew increasingly unstable. Her father's health was declining, and questions about the succession began to dominate palace conversations. According to Ptolemaic tradition, she would need to share power with one of her younger brothers. But Cleopatra had already begun to envision a different future for herself and for Egypt. The stage was being set for one of history's most dramatic ascensions to power. As this remarkable young woman prepared to claim her birthright and transform not just Egypt, but the entire ancient world, her childhood and education had given her tools that no previous pharaoh had possessed, and she was about to put them to use in ways that would echo through the centuries. As we pause here in our journey through Cleopatra's early life, let your mind drift peacefully back to that moonlit palace in Alexandria, where a teenage princess studied late into the night, surrounded by scrolls and dreams of the future. Tomorrow, we'll continue our story as Cleopatra steps onto the world stage and begins the remarkable reign that would make her immortal. Let the gentle sounds of the Nile at night carry you deeper into our story as we witness the moment when destiny called upon a young woman to become a legend. The year is 51 BCE, and the magnificent palace of Alexandria is shrouded in an atmosphere of anticipation and uncertainty. Tommy XII lies dying, and with his final breaths he sets in motion events that will reshape the ancient world. Picture Cleopatra, now 18 years old, standing beside her father's deathbed as the Mediterranean moonlight filters through the palace windows. She has spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Yet nothing could have truly readied her for the weight of responsibility that now settles upon her shoulders like a royal cloak. The crown of Egypt, with all its glory and burden, is about to become hers. According to the ancient customs of her dynasty, Cleopatra must share the throne with her 10-year-old brother Tommy XIII. But even as the coronation ceremonies begin, she understands that this arrangement is merely temporary. Her brother is little more than a child, easily influenced by the ambitious courtiers who surround him. while she possesses the knowledge, experience and vision to rule Egypt alone, the early months of her reign reveal the full extent of Cleopatra's political genius. While other rulers might have been content to follow established traditions, she immediately begins implementing changes that demonstrate her deep understanding of Egypt's unique position in the ancient world. She recognizes that her kingdom sits at the crossroads of Africa, Asia and Europe, making it the natural hub for trade, culture and diplomacy. One of her first acts as pharaoh is to personally visit the great temple of Ptah in Memphis, where she participates in the sacred rituals that formally recognize her as the divine ruler of Egypt. But this is no mere ceremonial gesture. By speaking to the priests and worshippers in fluent Egyptian, she signals to her subjects that she is different from her predecessors, that she truly understands and respects the ancient traditions that bind Egypt together. The economic challenges facing Egypt at this time would have overwhelmed a lesser ruler. But Cleopatra approaches them with the mathematical precision she learned during her childhood education. The kingdom's finances are strained by tribute payments to Rome, yet she discovers innovative ways to increase revenue without overburdening her people. She reorganizes the tax collection system, eliminates corruption among provincial governors, and establishes new trade partnerships that bring unprecedented wealth flowing into Egyptian coffers. Her reforms extend far beyond mere bookkeeping. Cleopatra understands that Egypt's greatest asset is its agricultural productivity, particularly the grain that feeds much of the Roman world. She personally travels throughout the kingdom, visiting farms and irrigation projects, consulting with engineers about improving the complex system of canals and dikes that channel the Nile's annual flood. These journeys also serve a political purpose, as they allow her subjects to see their pharaoh in person, to witness her genuine concern for their welfare. The young queen's intellectual curiosity continues to drive her, even amid the pressures of rulership. She establishes new schools throughout Alexandria, attracts brilliant scholars to her court, and personally participates in the philosophical debates that make her capital the intellectual centre of the ancient world. The great library of Alexandria reaches new heights of magnificence under her patronage, with scribes working tirelessly to copy and preserve the accumulated wisdom of human civilization. But it is Cleopatra's mastery of languages that truly sets her apart as a ruler. When Arabian merchants visit her court, she negotiates with them in Arabic. When Jewish leaders seek audience, she addresses them in Hebrew. When Roman diplomats arrive, she speaks to them in Latin so perfect that they forget she is not Roman herself. This linguistic versatility is more than impressive showmanship. It is practical diplomacy of the highest order, allowing her to build personal relationships with leaders throughout the known world. As her confidence grows, so does the opposition she faces from within her own court. Her younger brother, Tommy the 13th, now guided by ambitious advisors who see an opportunity to seize real power, begins to challenge her authority. The traditional faction of Greek nobles who have always resented any pharaoh who showed too much favour to native Egyptians quietly works to undermine her reforms. The situation grows increasingly tense as competing claims to legitimacy create dangerous divisions within the royal court. The crisis comes to a head when civil war erupts between the two siblings, each claiming to be the rightful ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra finds herself forced to flee Alexandria, gathering loyal supporters as she retreats toward the Syrian border. For many rulers, such a setback would mark the end of their ambitions, but for Cleopatra it becomes an opportunity to demonstrate the full extent of her remarkable abilities. During her months in exile, she reveals talents that even her closest advisors had not fully appreciated. She proves herself to be a brilliant military strategist, personally planning the campaigns that will restore her to power. She demonstrates remarkable endurance, marching alongside her soldiers through desert heat and sleeping in simple tents rather than demanding royal accommodations. Most importantly, she shows an ability to inspire absolute loyalty among her followers, who come to see her not just as their queen, but as their champion against the corrupt forces that have driven her from her rightful throne. The turning point comes when Cleopatra learns that Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, has arrived in Alexandria, pursuing his rival Pompey in their own civil war. Here is an opportunity that a lesser politician might have missed entirely, but Cleopatra immediately grasps its significance. Caesar represents both danger and opportunity, a chance to secure Roman support for her cause, but also the risk of reducing Egypt to the mere Roman province. The famous story of how she smuggled herself into Caesar's presence, hidden in a carpet or laundry bundle, captures the imagination precisely because it reveals so much about her character. This is not the action of a desperate refugee, but the calculated move of a master strategist who understands that dramatic gestures sometimes achieve more than formal diplomacy. When she emerges before the astonished Roman general, she's not pleading for help, but proposing an alliance between equals. The meeting between Cleopatra and Caesar marks the beginning of one of history's most consequential partnerships. But we must understand that their relationship, while certainly romantic, was fundamentally political. Cleopatra sees in Caesar a way to secure Egypt's independence while maintaining access to Roman markets and protection. Caesar sees in her a brilliant ally who can help him control the Eastern Mediterranean while providing the wealth needed to fund his own ambitions. Their negotiations demonstrate Cleopatra's sophisticated understanding of international politics. She does not simply ask for Roman military support to regain her throne. Instead, she proposes a comprehensive alliance that addresses Caesar's strategic needs while preserving Egypt's essential autonomy. She offers him the financial resources of her kingdom, the logistical support of her navy, and the diplomatic connections she has cultivated throughout the region. The restoration of Cleopatra to power, accomplished with Caesar's backing, showcases her remarkable ability to transform military victory into lasting political success. Rather than simply punishing her enemies, she demonstrates the magnanimity that marks great rulers throughout history. She pardons many of those who opposed her, incorporating them back into her administration while ensuring their loyalty through a combination of generous treatment and careful monitoring. Her brother Tommy XIII dies during the conflict. Whether by accident or design remains unclear, leaving Cleopatra free to rule Egypt without the burden of shared power. But she continues to observe the traditional forms, marrying her even younger brother Tommy XIV, who poses no threat to her authority, while satisfying the dynastic requirements that legitimize her reign in the eyes of conservative nobles. The months that Caesar spends in Alexandria reveal the full extent of Cleopatra's intellectual partnership with the Roman general. Together, they tour the Great Library, discuss philosophical questions with assembled scholars, and plan ambitious construction projects that will further enhance Alexandria's reputation as the jewel of the Mediterranean. Caesar, who is himself a brilliant writer and scholar, finds in Cleopatra a rare equal, someone who can match his own intellectual curiosity and strategic vision. But their most significant collaboration is the birth of their son, Caesarion, whose very existence represents Cleopatra's long-term strategy for Egypt's future. This child, combining the bloodlines of the Ptolemies and the Caesars, embodies her vision of a partnership between Egypt and Rome that preserves her kingdom's independence while securing its prosperity. The boy becomes not just her heir, but a living symbol of the new order she hopes to create. When Caesar departs Alexandria to continue his campaigns, Cleopatra has achieved something remarkable. She has not only regained her throne, but has transformed Egypt's relationship with Rome from one of subordination to one of alliance. Her kingdom remains independent, its wealth intact, its cultural traditions respected, yet she has also secured the protection and partnership of the world's most powerful military leader. The news of Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE reaches Alexandria like a thunderbolt, threatening to destroy everything Cleopatra has built. With her protector dead, and Rome plunged into chaos, Egypt once again faces the prospect of becoming a mere province in someone else's empire. But rather than despair, Cleopatra sees this crisis as another opportunity to demonstrate her remarkable resilience and strategic brilliance. As various Roman leaders struggle for control of Caesar's legacy, Cleopatra carefully evaluates each potential successor, seeking the one who can best serve Egypt's interest while honouring her partnership with the murdered general. Her choice eventually falls upon Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted lieutenants, a man whose military prowess and political connections make him a natural ally for her ambitions. The famous meeting between Cleopatra and Antony on her golden barge reveals once again her mastery of symbolic diplomacy. Every detail of this encounter is carefully orchestrated to create maximum impact. From her costume as the goddess Aphrodite, to the magnificent display of Egyptian wealth and artistry that surrounds her. But beneath the theatrical spectacle lies serious political calculation as she works to forge a new alliance that will secure Egypt's future in the post-sea world. Their partnership proves even more productive than her relationship with Caesar had been. Together, Cleopatra and Antony envision an Eastern Empire that combines Roman military might with Egyptian wealth and Egyptian wisdom. They plan campaigns that will extend their joint influence from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, creating a power base strong enough to rival Rome itself. During these years of partnership with Antony, Cleopatra reaches the pinnacle of her powers as both ruler and diplomat. Picture her now in her late 20s, no longer the young woman who had to smuggle herself into Caesar's presence, but a mature queen whose reputation extends across the known world. Her palace in Alexandria has become a centre of learning and culture that rivals anything Rome can offer. While her personal influence shapes events from Britain to India, the economic achievements of her reign during this period are nothing short of extraordinary. Under her guidance, Egypt experiences a golden age of prosperity that benefits not just the wealthy elite, but ordinary farmers, craftsmen, and merchants throughout the kingdom. She revolutionizes the ancient trade routes that connect Africa with Asia and Europe, establishing new partnerships with kingdoms as distant as India and Ethiopia. Egyptian ships flying her personal standard become familiar sights in harbours from Spain to the Persian Gulf. Her innovations in agriculture transform Egypt into an even more productive granary for the ancient world. Working closely with engineers and farmers, she oversees the construction of new irrigation systems that increase crop yields while reducing the labour required for cultivation. These projects employ thousands of workers, stimulating the economy while improving the lives of rural communities that had been neglected by previous rulers. But perhaps most remarkably, Cleopatra begins to envision Egypt as something more than just a regional power. Her correspondence with rulers throughout the ancient world reveals a woman thinking on a truly global scale, planning trade networks that would span continents and diplomatic alliances that would reshape the balance of international power. She exchanges gifts and ambassadors with the Queen of Ethiopia, negotiates commercial treaties with Arabian princes, and maintains friendly relations with the distant kingdoms of India. The cultural flowering of Alexandria under her patronage attracts scholars, artists and philosophers from every corner of the Mediterranean world. The great library expands to contain nearly 500,000 scrolls, while the museum becomes a research centre where brilliant minds collaborate on projects that advance human knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, medicine and engineering. Cleopatra herself participates actively in these intellectual pursuits, contributing to discussions on subjects ranging from naval architecture to agricultural chemistry. Her mastery of languages continues to serve her well in these international dealings. When she receives delegations from distant lands, she often astonishes visitors by addressing them in their native tongues, demonstrating not just linguistic skill, but genuine respect for their cultures. These personal touches help her build the kind of trust and rapport that formal diplomacy alone cannot achieve, creating lasting partnerships that benefit Egypt for generations. The military aspects of her reign also deserve recognition, though they are often overshadowed by her diplomatic achievements. Cleopatra proves herself to be an exceptionally capable naval commander, personally overseeing the construction of a fleet that becomes one of the most formidable in the ancient world. Her ships are not just instruments of war, but floating ambassadors that carry Egyptian influence to distant shores, while protecting the trade routes that bring prosperity to her kingdom. During joint campaigns with Antony, she demonstrates remarkable strategic insight, often suggesting tactics that prove crucial to their victories. Her understanding of logistics, gained from years of managing Egypt's complex economy, helps their armies remain supplied and effective even during extended campaigns far from home. Roman historians, despite their later hostility toward her, grudgingly acknowledge her military competence and her ability to inspire fierce loyalty among her troops. The children she bears during this period represent more than just personal happiness. They embody her vision for Egypt's future. In addition to Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, she has 3 children with Antony, each one a potential bridge between Egyptian and Roman interests. She personally oversees their education, ensuring they master the same diverse curriculum that shaped her own development, while preparing them for the complex political challenges they will eventually face. Her relationship with the Egyptian people during these prosperous years reveals the full extent of her political genius. Unlike previous Ptolemaic rulers who remained isolated in Alexandria, Cleopatra regularly travels throughout her kingdom, visiting temples, inspecting public works projects, and meeting with local leaders. These journeys are not mere ceremonial occasions, but working visits where she addresses real problems and implements practical solutions. The religious dimension of her reign continues to deepen as she matures as a ruler. She becomes increasingly identified with the goddess Isis, not just in ceremonial contexts, but as a living embodiment of divine wisdom and protection. This spiritual authority proves just as important as her political power, creating bonds with her subjects that transcend mere loyalty to government and approach genuine devotion to their queen as a sacred figure. Her court during these years attracts visitors from across the known world, all eager to witness the splendour of the last great pharaoh. Ambassadors return to their home countries with tales of banquets, where the food is served on golden plates, where the entertainment includes performances by the finest musicians and dancers in the world, and where the Queen herself participates in philosophical discussions that continue long into the night. But beneath all this magnificence, Cleopatra never loses sight of the practical challenges that face her kingdom. She continues to modernize Egypt's administrative systems, creating more efficient methods for tax collection, record keeping, and communication between the capital and distant provinces. Her reforms ensure that royal decrees reach even the most remote villages, while reports from local officials flow back to Alexandria with unprecedented speed and accuracy. The scientific and technological advances sponsored by her court have lasting impact far beyond Egypt's borders. Alexandrian scholars working with resources she provides make breakthrough discoveries in astronomy that improve navigation for merchants and naval commanders throughout the Mediterranean. Medical researchers supported by royal patronage develop new treatments for diseases that have plagued humanity for centuries. Engineers design architectural innovations that influence construction projects across the ancient world. Her personal library, separate from the great public collection, contains works in dozens of languages, many of them acquired through her extensive correspondence with rulers and scholars worldwide. She reads voraciously, staying current with philosophical developments in Athens, scientific discoveries in Rhodes, and historical chronicles from Rome. This intellectual curiosity keeps her informed about trends and events that might affect Egypt's interests, while also satisfying her genuine love of learning for its own sake. The diplomatic protocols she establishes become models that other courts throughout the ancient world eventually adopt. Her innovations in ceremonial practice, gift exchange, and treaty negotiation reflect her deep understanding of human psychology and cultural differences. Foreign ambassadors often comment on the skill with which she manages to honour their traditions while maintaining Egypt's dignity and independence. As her partnership with Anthony deepens and expands, their joint vision for the future becomes increasingly ambitious. They plan to create an Eastern empire that would stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of China, combining Roman military organisation with Egyptian wealth and administrative expertise. This grand design requires careful coordination between their respective territories, leading to innovations in communication and transportation that benefit both kingdoms. The naval expeditions they sponsor together explore trade routes that previous generations had considered impossibly dangerous. Egyptian and Roman ships sailing under joint command establish commercial relationships with kingdoms along the African coast, in the Arabian Peninsula, and beyond the Persian Gulf. These voyages bring back not just exotic goods, but knowledge of distant peoples and cultures that enriches the cosmopolitan atmosphere of Alexandria. Her influence on Roman culture during this period is often underestimated by historians who focus primarily on military and political events. Through her relationship with Antony and the Roman officers who serve in Egypt, she introduces Eastern customs, artistic styles, and intellectual traditions that gradually transform Roman society. The luxury goods, architectural techniques, and scholarly works that flow from Egypt to Rome help create the cultural synthesis that will characterize the later Roman Empire. The festivals and celebrations she organizes in Alexandria become legendary throughout the ancient world, attracting visitors who travel thousands of miles just to witness these spectacular events. But these gatherings serve serious political purposes as well as providing entertainment. They offer opportunities for diplomatic negotiations, commercial agreements, and cultural exchanges that strengthen Egypt's position in the complex web of international relationships. Her personal involvement in every aspect of government continues to astonish those who work with her. She reviews financial reports with the same attention to detail that she brings to military planning or religious ceremonies. Her memory for names, dates, and statistical information becomes legendary among her administrators, who learn that she expects them to match her own standards of thoroughness and accuracy. The construction projects undertaken during her reign transform Alexandria into one of the most beautiful cities in the ancient world. New temples, libraries, theatres, and public buildings rise throughout the capital, each one designed to showcase both Egyptian traditions and international influences. These architectural achievements create employment for thousands of skilled craftsmen, while demonstrating Egypt's prosperity and cultural sophistication to visitors from around the world. But even as Cleopatra reaches the height of her power and influence, she remains acutely aware of the gathering storm clouds on the horizon. The political situation in Rome grows increasingly unstable, with various factions competing for control of the Republic's destiny. Her intelligence network, one of the most sophisticated in the ancient world, brings her regular reports of developments that could threaten everything she has built. The growing hostility between Antony and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, creates particular concern for Egypt's future. She understands that this conflict will eventually force her to choose sides, and that the wrong choice could mean the end of Egyptian independence. Her preparations for this coming crisis demonstrate once again her remarkable ability to think strategically while managing the immediate demands of ruling a complex kingdom. As we pause here in our journey through Cleopatra's remarkable reign, let the gentle rhythm of the Nile carry your thoughts back to those golden days when Alexandria stood as the jewel of the ancient world, and when a brilliant queen worked tirelessly to secure her people's prosperity and independence. The challenges ahead will test every skill she has developed, every alliance she has forged, and every dream she has dared to pursue. The shadows of conflict begin to lengthen across the Mediterranean as we continue our peaceful journey through Cleopatra's extraordinary life. Picture her now in her palace study, surrounded by maps and scrolls, the flickering oil lamps casting dancing patterns on the walls as she works late into the night. At 34, she has become one of the most powerful rulers in the ancient world, yet she faces challenges that would have broken lesser monarchs. The tension between Mark Antony and Octavian has escalated beyond mere political rivalry into open warfare, and Cleopatra understands that Egypt's fate hangs in the balance. Her spies throughout the Roman world send regular reports that paint an increasingly dire picture. Octavian has proven himself to be a masterful propagandist, portraying Antony as a traitor who has fallen under the spell of an exotic foreign queen. The Roman people, already suspicious of Eastern influences, begin to view Egypt not as an ally, but as a threat to their traditional values, Let your mind drift peacefully as we observe Cleopatra during these crucial months, watching her navigate the treacherous waters of international politics with the same skills she once applied to her childhood studies. She recognizes that this conflict will determine not just her personal survival, but the continuation of 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization. The weight of history rests upon her shoulders, yet she approaches each decision with the calm deliberation that has always marked her leadership. Her preparations for the coming war reveal the full extent of her administrative genius. Throughout Egypt, shipyards work around the clock to construct vessels for her growing fleet. She personally oversees the design of new warships that incorporate innovations learned from captured Roman vessels while maintaining the superior maneuverability that has always characterized Egyptian naval architecture. These ships will carry not just soldiers and weapons, but the hopes of an entire civilization. The economic mobilization she orchestrates demonstrates her profound understanding of warfare as more than just military tactics. She restructures Egypt's entire production system to support the war effort, yet manages to do so without causing hardship for her people. Grain surpluses are carefully managed to feed both civilian populations and military forces. Textile workshops produce uniforms and sailcloth. Metal workers forge weapons and armour using techniques perfected over centuries of Egyptian craftsmanship. Her diplomatic efforts during this period showcase the extensive network of relationships she has built throughout her reign. Messages flow constantly between Alexandrian courts across the known world as she seeks to build a coalition that can match Roman power. From the mountain kingdoms of Armenia to the desert principalities of Arabia, rulers who have benefited from Egyptian trade and friendship now face pressure to choose sides in the coming conflict. The personal cost of these preparations weighs heavily upon Cleopatra's heart. Though she rarely allows others to see her private struggles, her children, the living symbols of her partnerships with Rome's greatest leaders, represent both her greatest achievements and her deepest vulnerabilities. Caesarion, now approaching manhood, embodies her hopes for a future that bridges Egyptian and Roman civilizations. Her younger children with Antony carry the promise of continuing alliances, yet their very existence makes them targets for Octavian's hatred. During quiet moments stolen from the constant demands of war preparation, Cleopatra continues to pursue the intellectual interests that have always sustained her spirit. She corresponds with philosophers in Athens, exchanges astronomical observations with scholars in Rhodes, and maintains her support for the research projects that make Alexandria the intellectual capital of the ancient world. Even facing the greatest crisis of her reign, she refuses to abandon the pursuit of knowledge that defines her civilization. Her religious duties take on heightened significance as the crisis deepens. The Egyptian people look to their pharaoh not just as a political leader, but as a divine intermediary who can invoke the god's protection for their homeland. She spends long hours in the great temples participating in ceremonies that have sustained Egypt through previous invasions and occupations. The priests who serve with her speak of an aura of serene determination that surrounds her during these sacred rituals. The intelligence reports that reach her desk paint an increasingly clear picture of Octavian's strategy. He has chosen to portray the coming conflict not as a civil war between Romans, but as a patriotic struggle against foreign influence. Cleopatra becomes the central figure in his propaganda campaign, depicted as a scheming seductress who has corrupted noble Roman virtues. She understands that defeating Octavian will require not just military victory, but a counter-narrative that reveals the truth about her motivations and achievements. Her meetings with Anthony during this period reveal the deep partnership they have forged over years of collaboration. Together they plan campaigns that will leverage Egypt's naval superiority and economic resources against Octavian's control of Italy and the western provinces. Sleep now. Let yourself sink deeper into that perfect relaxation. Your eyelids are heavy. So heavy it would take too much effort to open them now. Your limbs feel pleasantly weighted, impossible to move even if you wanted to, which you don't. You just want to drift all the way down into deep, restful sleep. That's it. Just let go completely. The day is done. The work is finished. Nothing more required of you now except to rest, to renew, to dream perhaps of different possibilities, different worlds. But for now, just sleep deep and peaceful, easy and calm. Sleep now. Sleep well. Drifting deeper with each breath down and down into perfect, complete rest.